So we dove in pretty early to really immerse ourselves in the history of the club, the history of the city. And there was one idea that came up pretty early, which was that so many of the new stadiums were becoming these big donut-shaped things. And it felt a little to me like architects were trying to become more like an NFL stadium. When in fact, in the history of English football, the way these stadiums tended to grow up was there was a pitch and there was an initial stand, and then as the club grew, they would somehow fill in the block and become these very quirky, not completely symmetrical things. Everton initially liked that idea, but there was also a really strong feeling from the chairman that he loved the idea of history and tradition, but he wanted it to feel like a contemporary building. So we sort of went back to the drawing board and thought, okay, well, let's try and capture everything that was really great in this sort of traditional configuration of a building, but could we wrap it in a way or position it in a way that it was both, that it felt historic and contemporary at the same time. So the site they were actually looking at was a historic dock dating back to the early 1800s. What was great about this was that we had the opportunity to build a building right on the edge of the river, so we knew it was going to have a presence that very few football stadiums would have. There was a very early sketch that became the inspiration for the whole thing, which was this kind of brick base that related to the architecture of Liverpool and the docks, and then this wave, this blue wave, the idea that the Mersey's kind of washing over the stadium. And then that gave us the idea of doing this kind of very contemporary roof form on this very traditional brick base. And the idea of that was that you get both, and you get this sort of history that feels like it's growing out of the dock, and then with this very contemporary form of the roof, and that became the driver to the design. Building a building of this complexity is difficult in the best of circumstances. When you have a dock that's full of water, it just, everything becomes exponentially more difficult. In our case, besides the sort of technical challenges of filling the dock and making it a buildable site, we went through COVID in the middle of the development. As they were trying to clear the dock in order to fill it in, they found unexploded World War II ordnance and had to call in engineers to remove that. And there were dolphins in there at one point, and that stopped construction. So throughout the whole process, there were all kinds of challenges that you wouldn't run into in a normal site. But to the club's credit, and I think this is probably a story that just doesn't get out there enough, that they were committed to this site for so many reasons beyond just providing the club with a new stadium. And they recognized that if they could do this here, it wasn't only good for their fans, it was good for Liverpool, it was good for the whole region. It was a very bold decision. One of the cool things in the design was that we were able to sort of designate where the historic dock was. And this was actually a former UNESCO World Heritage Site. The docks were that important. And so as we placed the building on the site with the concourses and everything, we end up with this kind of fan plaza, and we end up with this pretty cool concept of where the existing dock was. There's a change in the pattern of the material in the plaza so that people walking in kind of discover that that is where the original dock was. And it's a great reminder of sort of the engineering feat of building this building, that it really is sitting over what used to be a historic dock. I can't remember how it initially started, but all of a sudden I found myself in a dialogue on Twitter about this idea of a blue wave of fans and a tsunami's coming, and to kind of build some excitement. And it was the first time in my career that I've had this opportunity to really talk to fans while we were in the middle of designing a building. And again, I think a bit bold on the club's part, but throughout the entire process of maybe the 5 years beyond the sort of early concepts to realizing the building, I was in almost daily contact and felt like I had 70 or 80,000 collaborators helping me design the building. And in the end, for all of the heated discussions, I think it was really an incredible experience for everybody. It affected me and certainly affected the design. I think it made the fans feel like they really did have a voice in their new home, which is incredibly powerful. It's something we've learned that I think we want to do with every project going forward, to the extent the owners will, the clubs will allow it, because I've often said this to owners: you may think you own this team, but I promise you there's 100,000 people that think they own the team. But they were really good about letting me sort of talk to the fans. And there were some pretty robust discussions about capacity. Big part of the fan base, all they cared about was that if we're going to build a new building, we have to be bigger than Anfield. 1 seat more, as long as we're just somewhere above Liverpool. And so I started a back and forth with explaining why you try and right size a building. It doesn't matter if Anfield has 60,000 seats or 70,000 seats. It's how many seats are right on this site for Everton. We were sensitive to the fact that we're moving from Goodison. How do we bring some of that magic with us? And it became the driver that, again, I think made us feel like we could do something maybe that a typical stadium architect in the UK might not even think about, which was, it's not about the architecture, it's really about how you put these fans on top of the pitch, that they become that 12th man, that they really do affect the game. And then as you put people on the pitch, you keep them as close as you possibly can in every way you possibly can. But if the pitch is here and the fans are right on the wall, and same thing with the upper deck, wherever we have a break, can we bring that in as close as possible and make it as steep as possible? And the idea is that you really do create this cauldron of energy. And at that point, again, it almost didn't matter what the rest of the architecture was and all of the technical aspects of solving the building and the dock. It was about how do we get people to feel like they are literally right on top of the pitch, right at the wall, part of the game, and they become critical factor in home pitch advantage. And again, that was a lesson we learned through the development of that I think will affect the work we will do forever going forward. I think, one of the things that was a big surprise here, because I've been designing buildings like this for, 32 years, something like that. But because of who Everton was, because of who Liverpool is as a city, this became such a personal project for me. I got an Everton tattoo pretty early in the process. But the point is that it taught me a lesson that it's not just another project. These buildings are so personal. It's not just personal to me or the owner. It's personal to 70, 100,000 fans and generations of those fans, from their memories as a child to how going to a game with their grandfather. And that sort of personal aspect of it really affected us. I think all of us on the team, that we became Evertonians through this process. And it's a challenge, because obviously there is a day, and we're there now, where the building is going to open up, and then it becomes, the building for them, and it's not ours anymore. It's not our baby, and we have to move on to another one. And I think that's been a really interesting journey, because it affected us so much. We learned so much. I think the fans taught us a lot, and we were able to teach them in the process. And the question is, how do we replicate that experience? How do we go to the next one and not feel like we're cheating on Everton?